Hi, Gordon Waite here. Today I'm making pitch polishers to work on this 12-inch f4.9 telescope mirror. I've got some pitch that's melted up here on top of the range, and a couple hints about doing pitch. The first one is you don't want to boil it. If you boil it, it'll get harder and harder the longer you boil it, and you really don't want a lot of bubbles on it. You'll always have some bubbles coming up, but the trick is to heat it up slowly and not get any bubbles in it. I just use a popsicle stick or a craft stick to stir the pitch, and basically I recycle all of my pitch as long as I can. So when I'm done with the polisher, I'll just chip it off, put it in the freezer, chip it off, throw it in one of these little aluminum pans, and use it again the next time. I don't bother to do any sort of filtering. It's really not necessary. When you heat up pitch, if there are contaminants in it, anything light floats to the surface and you can skim it off, and anything heavy falls down to the bottom and it doesn't get poured out onto the mirror. So don't bother trying to filter pitch. It's just not going to do anything for you. Now, this pitch has been recycled many times. What I do is I use a little teeny bit of mineral oil in the melt to restore just a little bit of the volatiles that are lost when pitch is reheated. And it doesn't take much. We're talking a teaspoon or maybe as much as a teaspoon and a half in a large container of pitch, but just a little bit. Then after the mineral oil goes in there, go back to the craft stick and stir it until the mineral oil is absorbed and distributed throughout the pitch. You'll notice when it goes in, it does stay on top, and you'll want to stir it until it does get mixed down into the pitch. For this 12.5-inch mirror, I'm going to prepare 4 different pitch polishers. The largest, which I'll use for rough polishing, is a 9-inch diameter, and I choose that diameter because it's 75% of the diameter of the mirror. I'm going to use spin polishing, and that 75% number with a 15% overhang is just about perfect to produce a sphere during the rough polishing process. The next largest pitch polisher will be a 6-inch. Then I also have a 5-inch setup and a small 3.5. Now, these 3 polishers will be for figuring. The little tiny one is kind of for zone work if you've got a little problem that's narrow on the mirror. And the 5 and the 6 inchers, the 6-inch is for fairly rapidly digging out for rough parabolization, and the 5-inch gives you a little more control and runs a little slower. So these 4 sizes will be a good match for this 12-inch mirror. Now, the pitch polishers are on dental plaster substrates. They're all roughly 1 inch to 1.25 inches in diameter. The one for the rough polishing has a bushing embedded in it, and that's where my machine will come down and hook onto it to hold it still during the spin polishing. The little ones that I use for hand polishing for the touch-up, most of them don't have a socket in the back. I think this one probably does. I must use that on a smallish mirror to do some rough polishing at one time. So the first thing to do to prep these for pouring here is I take some blue painter's tape and I make a dam around the top of the pitch polisher. And basically I'm going to put maybe 3/8 of an inch of pitch on here. So I need to have a dam that's roughly that tall or a little taller. So a pretty simple process, just goes around, overlaps. On the end I make a tag on it so it's easy to grab hold of so I can pull it off. Then I go around with my hand and just press it up against the body of the polisher there to make sure that the pitch won't be running out the sides. So I've got that one all prepped. Now I do one polisher at a time. It's a 2-part pour, and you have to time it just right so that the texture of the pitch, the hardness of it, is just right when you go to make your mold. So get that on there. I'll do one at a time, and I'll probably only do the first one to show you the technique, and then at the end I'll show you all of them after they're finished. Well, I'm all set to do this first pour on this 9-inch polisher. I've got a beautiful molten pan of pitch here. By the way, this is Google's, and it's probably 64, so it's pretty much all set and ready to go. A little dangerous pouring this stuff. It's very hot, so what I do is typically I'll turn the faucet on with some cold water and leave that running. If I have an accident or something, then I can dunk myself in the water and try to cool off. But the bad part about pitch, it will stick to your skin and you can get a pretty bad burn from it. So you do want to be careful handling it. Ready to do the pour now into this. I'm going to fill it up about 2/3 of the way up to the top of my tape there, and we'll be ready to make a polisher here. Make sure the heat's turned off first. Try to pour it fairly evenly. And there's our first pour. Now, my technique is kind of two-pronged. It's kind of interesting. I pour onto the substrate. Gravity makes the top of this be flat. So now I'm going to make another pour on top of the mirror to fill it up to the diameter of this, roughly, or a little less. And then when they both get to the right texture, this one in particular gets to the right texture, the right hardness, I'm going to strip the tape off, turn it upside down, and mate those two together. That means I'll have a perfect mold against my pre-ground mirror here, and I won't have to worry about getting it to conform to the shape. So to prepare this, I use some cerium oxide, and I use really cheap stuff. I always keep 2 grades of cerium oxide on hand. One that's really, really inexpensive, and I use that for making pitch polishers and for rough polishing, where you don't really care about the quality of the polish. And then a finer cerium oxide for finishing. So I get that on there, just use a hand to spread it around. And all this little layer of cerium oxide will keep the pitch from adhering to the surface of the mirror. It's kind of amazing. But you don't want to have a lot of water. You don't really want it to pool up very much. So I just skid it off into the sink and leave myself with a nice layer, wet but not a pool. Now the process for determining what the texture of this should be, basically I push in the edge of my tape. When it's molten, the tape will immediately spring right back. But as this starts to solidify, the tape will come back more slowly. And you want to get kind of, there's a perfect spot where you push it and it'll stay in and then really just slowly come back. Now it's not hugely important, the texture on this, because the surface is flat, this surface will be flat, and they'll mate, so it's not a big deal. You want it to be warm enough so that it will bond together, but I always pour this just before I do the mating. So the consistency of this isn't hugely important. What you want is it not to be loose. If this is still runny and you jerk the tape off, you're going to have pitch everywhere, and that's not going to be good. So now it's just time to wait until this solidifies enough to put it on. One other trick is you'll want to rotate this as it solidifies, because there'll always be air currents in your work area and one side will cool faster than the other. So keep this rotating to make sure that the whole pitch polisher is cooling at roughly the same rate. Okay, the texture on this polisher is getting pretty good. When I push it in now, it really slowly comes back. I can feel it's firming up pretty good. So time to pour onto the mirror. This is solidified just a little bit, so I just pour it right in the middle. And again, I'm going to try to go, I'll shoot for about an 8-inch diameter, I guess, here. You don't want to get extra on. If you get extra on, it'll just squish out and can get pretty messy. Yeah, that's pretty good. Pitch always gets everywhere, can't be avoided. Okay, that's roughly a hand span there, a little under a hand span, that's just about right. So now this, I can see it's firm enough where it's not going to make a mess when I pull the edge off. I'll give it just a few seconds more here. Pretty firm on this side. Okay, let's get her off. I just grab hold of my little tag there, bring it around and pull it off. Now the pitch is in an interesting condition here. It's soft enough where you can actually mold it with your hands and cool enough where you won't be burned by it. You can see I can pull this off and the pitch stays right up on top. If it's a little soft, it'll start to, bend over the edge. And the trick is to give a firm snap when you pull the tape off. So we're looking good on the pitch here. Just a handful of bubbles, they won't hurt anything. And basically now it's time to mate these two. I would check and make sure that when I tilt this, that the pitch in the center, which is always a little warmer than the pitch around the edge, that it won't slop out. It's cool enough. So basically it's time to go. Get my hands in the right positions, upside down, and on to the other one. And you want to hold this up, take the weight off it, because it's still warm inside and it will spread out. And that's kind of normal, don't worry if it does, but kind of keep the weight on it. You can see that the pitch that I poured onto the mirror, it loosened up from the mirror, it didn't attach itself to the mirror, it didn't stick there. And now basically I just sit here and move this around like this until the pitch solidifies enough where I can get it off the mirror and it'll hold the shape that I've molded onto it. Now this mirror has been ground to f4.9, 1500 millimeter focal length, 3000 millimeter radius. So not a real deep mirror as they go, but you can feel the heat in the tool, and basically you just do this and wait for it to cool down, and then we'll be sliding it off. So I'm going to work this and I'll bring you back when it's ready to come off. Okay, I'm just about ready to take this pitch polisher off the mirror. It still works okay. We're loosening it up on there. Now, a really cool thing to have for mirror making is a thermometer. This is an infrared thermometer, Radio Shack. They'll cost you $10 or $15, and they're really great for testing pitch. If you look at pitch in the container, it'll be about 165 to 185 degrees, something like that, when it's hot. And now I can test it on here, and we're down to 87 degrees. So I'll move it around to another side, get 93. Over here where it spilled out a little bit, 92. Basically, if the pitch is close to about 90 degrees, it'll hold its shape okay. We're pretty close to that. We're under 90 once in a while here, a little higher once in a while. So just I'll be a little careful when I take it off. Now the process that I use here, I'm going to just slide it off, and remember the mirror is concave, so as I slide it off I'll also go up a little bit. And the bottom of this will be soft, and what you don't want to have happen when you slide it is to let it go down, because that'll put a dent across your mirror, and that's hard to get out. You want to slide it off in one nice smooth motion and make sure you're in good shape like that. The next thing, as soon as I get it off there, I'm going to flip it over and put it under some running cold water here. And you don't want the water to hit in one spot. You want to run it around. You don't want it to be powerful, because even the water pressure will put a dent in it if you leave it in one spot. So I'll get some cold water running here. And we'll put a little water on the edge here. Swirl it around just a little bit. And I'm ready to slide this off. Here we go. And we have a perfect molded surface. That's a good one. That's perfect. Now the pitch ran a little over the edge here on one side. This side is a little bit of surplus over there. But I'll take that down into the polishing room and chip it off with a razor blade. We'll prep this one up, and in just a couple of hours this thing will be rough polishing on this 12-inch mirror. The first technique I showed you for pouring a pitch polisher works really well for large polishers and medium-sized polishers. For a small little polisher like this little guy, that might be a little overkill. So I'll show you how you do a really small polisher. I've already poured the pitch on here, and the texture of it is just right. I can push in, there's a little resistance, and it holds its shape. It doesn't spring back. So I know that I can mold it, but it's not going to pour easily. So I strip the tape off, snap that off. Now the trick to this is, I take this with my fingers, wet my fingers down, and then I mold the pitch in toward the center. I just slowly push it in and work it like this until the pitch heaps up in the center. And all I'm trying to do here is to make the center higher than the edges. And you can see it works really easily. And I want to get it all so that the center is the highest spot. And basically I'm putting a dome on the pitch. And you know, you try to get it even. The pitch isn't hot enough to burn me at this point. Exact temperature of it is 125 degrees. So it's a little hotter than your normal hot water in your house, but as long as my fingers are wet, it won't stick to me and won't burn me. I've got some cerium oxide already in the center of my mirror here, and now I have it domed up. I've got a nice dome over the top of it there, and basically I'm just going to put that down, touch it into the center of my mirror, and then push and turn until it conforms to the shape of the mirror. And I just go until it presses out even with the outside edge of the substrate of the dental plaster. Keep it turning around, keep pressing gently. You can see it'll conform. And when it's even all the way around the outside, it should be in good shape. Scooch it off. Here's a perfect pitch polisher. And that's just exactly right. No bubbles, no holes. Perfect to the edge, no surplus to cut off. And makes a nice little perfect pitch polisher. Well, it's time to prepare this 9-inch pitch polisher for work on the 12-inch mirror. The first thing I have to do is to knock off this overhanging part here and get the lap concentric. I just use a regular single-edged razor blade and do this over some newspaper, and we just kind of cut it with a shearing motion. Now all of this pitch that comes off, I save it and reuse it. It doesn't have to be filtered or anything. This goes back in the pitch pot and gets melted down and used another day. We're almost done. Now I'll be using this pitch polisher on my fixed post polishing machine. Fixed post polishing, spin polishing, whatever name you want to give to it. And that's why we have this little socket in the back. That is what the stainless steel bar comes down from our gantry and holds the pitch polisher in place. As the mirror spins, we get the polishing action. Okay, we've got that trimmed down. Now, traditionally, opticians will facet their mirror. They'll put trenches, V grooves in it, and make a grid on it. So you have a series of polishing squares or facets on the pitch polisher. But for spin polishing, fixed post polishing, what we found is that you really don't need that deep V groove in there. So instead of doing that, what I use now is a set of basically just deep scratches in the surface. And I'll show you how I produce those. I just, again, use this plain old razor blade, and I just dig in and make a set of scratches. And one of my secrets to it, or one of the things I do, is I don't have them be parallel. I have them fan out a little on one end. So you can see they're tighter together here and farther apart here. So I've got one set there. Now I rotate it about 120 degrees and make another set. Now by doing this, and instead of putting the deeper trenches in and faceting the mirror, by using this technique during the spin polishing, you don't have as much problem with concentric rings on the mirror, and you end up with a little smoother surface. And then I rotate it 120 again and go with another set of lines. Now you can see the pattern that we've got developed there. And this whole pattern, it's not too important. You know, you don't want it to be a symmetrical pattern. So you want to break it up a little bit. So I'll even go and just randomly do a little slashing on the mirror just to make sure I don't have any large unbroken areas on the mirror. So now I put down the razor blade and I have what's left of my old brass brush. And now the surface gets just a really good brushing. And what I want to do is to open up those little scratches that I put in there. And then also I want to take the shine off the pitch. I want the pitch to have a dull surface that's completely covered with scratches. A lot of people ask me, why do I use a brass brush? Well, brass is softer than the glass that we're working. So if one of these brass bristles ends up stuck in a groove or something like that, it won't do any serious damage to the mirror. Whereas if you had a steel brush, steel being harder than the glass, you would end up getting scratches on the mirror. Now, of course, the other reason that I'm experimenting with this is that basically I'm lazy, and it takes a little bit longer to do a complete faceting job on a pitch polisher than it does to do this simple little grooving methodology. So basically this is done and ready to go to work, and what I'll do is put it on the mirror. I'll have the mirror in the bottom and the pitch polisher on top, and I'll do a little bit of a cold press, but since I molded this to the surface of the mirror in the first place, it's already good contact. So I'll do a little cold press, and then we'll be doing spin polishing on this in about 15 minutes. Well, I'm ready to start polishing this 12-inch mirror. Again, this is a 12-inch f4.9, 1500 millimeter focal length. It's been fine ground, went down through 25 micron, 12, 9, 5, and I even did a little bit of time with 3 micron on this. Has a good spherical surface according to my spherometer. We're ready to start polishing. So we're going to use a 9-inch pitch polisher and some low-grade cerium oxide on here. For this sort of rough polishing where the only goal is to remove the pits, cheap cerium oxide saves a little money, actually probably cuts a little bit faster. So I put some Cerex on there. And then here's the pitch polisher. This is not really faceted like a normal lap. If you saw earlier in the video, I just used a razor blade and cut some grooves into it and brushed it really well with a brass brush. Put that on top of there gently, and then I lift the weight up and move it a little bit to make sure I don't have any bristles under there or anything chunky that might make things go wrong. Now I've already set this up, and how I do it, you run the polisher so that it's tangent at the back side. You can just feel it with your hand. If I measure this, it's 3 inches. It's a 9-inch polisher on a 12-inch mirror, leaves a 3-inch gap. Now in order to get the polishing action that I want to offset it over the edge by about 15%, or about 1.25 inches. So I've already measured that, and I know that where it's going to go, and I've set up my machine here so that when I put my post through there, it's going to hold this polisher at just the right spot. But first of all, I want to put a little weight on here. Not a lot to begin with, just 10 pounds. So I put 10 pounds on there. Then I have my stainless steel bar, and the bar drops down into the back of the mirror, or back of the polisher. There's a bronze bushing there to hold it. I have an aluminum collar on top here to set the stainless steel bar at the right spot. And that's all there is to it. It's ready to roll. Now we'll power this up. And I started out slow just to make sure everything's good. And then we'll slowly bring it up to speed. And on this machine, in this configuration, I don't hesitate to run 60 RPMs in the end here. So I've got it right now about 30. Move it up another notch, and now we're all the way up to 60 RPMs. Now this is the classic configuration for rough polishing on a fixed post machine. Some people again call it spin polishing. Now what you want to do is watch. You don't want this to dry out. I actually have a water drip system to automatically put some water on it. And then every so often you grab some cerium oxide and put a little bit on. One of the tricks, don't let the bottom of the bottle go over the mirror. Always keep the bottom off and just point the tip over. Now what I'll do, I'll polish for about 20 minutes in this configuration. Then I'll turn off the machine and I'll look at the polish as it's progressing on the mirror. In as little as 15 or 20 minutes, part of the mirror will start to clear. Now if the clearing area is stronger at the center, then I'm polishing more at the center. I'll move the stack out away from the mirror. If the mirror is polishing more at the edge, I'll move the stack in toward the center of the mirror. And what you want to do is find the sweet spot where it's evenly polishing the whole mirror. And once you find that, you just go from there to the end of the polishing without moving anything at all. And that's what spin polishing is all about. You get the machine configured in the sweet spot, and then you can just let it roll. So we'll let it go, and then a little later on we'll check and I'll show you what the polish is looking like. Well, I finished 20 minutes of polishing on the 12-inch mirror, and amazingly it's already nearly clear. That's the advantage of spin polishing in the first place and 3-micron grinding during the fine grinding stage. Very quick to get a mirror polished. Of course, 20 minutes isn't anywhere close to polishing it out, but it's good progress. Now, what we want to look at now is the condition of the polish. And to do that, I'm just going to use a laser pointer and run the beam over the surface of the mirror to see where it's polished more or less. And to make it a little clearer, I'm going to have to shut off our lights here. So, let's see if maybe one more light here. Now it's completely dark, but I'm hoping, yeah, you can see the laser beam. Right now the laser is in the center of the mirror, and there's kind of 3 spots on there. The center spot is the one that you really want to pay attention to. Now I've got that laser on the center of the mirror, and as I move it to the edge, we'll watch and see if it changes intensity. And it's just starting to fade away there at the edge. Now I'm about 3/4 of an inch inside the edge there. So you can see in the center of the mirror, which is about there, center of the mirror, it's very, very even until I get right to that outside edge. And there it fades off a little bit. So what that basically means is that we're getting a pretty good even polish on this thing, except we're getting a little extra polish right out at the very edge of the mirror. So what I'm going to do is just a tiny bit of movement on the polisher to bring it in a little bit toward the center. But really it's pretty even, and we're not going to worry if we get a little extra polish on the edge right now. That also evens out as we go along here. So basically I'm going to continue with the polishing, and the stages here, or the methodology is, I'll polish in 20-minute increments. So I'll do a 20-minute session, I'll stop, clean the mirror, brush the tool, brush the polisher with a brass brush, and then I'll rotate the mirror on the turntable. so that every 20 minutes it gets repositioned on the table. And that rotation is to prevent astigmatism from being polished into the mirror. And the polishing stage here will take maybe 2 to 3 hours to get it fully polished out. And that's just the goal here, is just to get it polished out. During that time I really won't be doing any tests or anything like that. I'll get it polished out and then deal with what I find at that time. So onward to a couple 2 or 3 hours of polishing, and then we'll have a look at the mirror, see what it looks like optically.